I'm going to call the meeting to order at 10:34. Land acknowledgement. In the spirit of respect, truth, and reconciliation, we honor and thank the Indigenous people on whose traditional and unceded lands we operate. Can I have a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Gary, second. Andy, thank you. Minutes. The minutes of the March 18, 2025 East End Services Committee were presented. Is there any errors in the mission?
No errors or omissions. Move as presented.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Alex. Second. All in favor? Carried. Okay. Unfinished business. There is none. New business. Janelle Park. Mark, you're up.
James is just going to pop up here, a copy of the invitation that we've got going out that we've already posted on Janelle Info Board's Facebook page and on our RDKB website. And thanks, Mom. This is Bobby.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for folks that are viewing at sides, currently we now, I think, have to have new screens on order. Usually ones, the two on the sides here have completely failed.
Okay.
Almost there. There we go.
So, oh, that was great. So it's moved. The project's moving along, which is great. As everybody knows, we have funding, I think, to the tune of $1.2 million in grant funds from Columbia Basin Trust and such. And so we have this beautiful park plan design by George Harris Collaboratives, and we want to present it to the community. You know, we're looking for some input. People have any questions, they have any concerns or ideas, this is an opportunity for the public to present them in person. As some of you know, we presented this at the last town hall meeting, and we had a lot of questions from the public, and which some of them we were able to answer, but we thought the next step in the process should be rightfully to have a community hall meeting, present the design, have George Harris Collaboratives present that and their rationale as to why, based on the feedback we received when we did the first open house on this project, and then go from there. And this is going to be more of a social kind of drop-in theme. It's not going to be like a formal presentation where we're all standing up making speeches and such, but just an opportunity to, as a meet and greet, allow people to talk to the consultant, talk to us, field any questions, and you know, if some of them are pretty legit, you know, we'll look at figuring things out and tweaking the plan a little bit. So yeah, some of the things that we've done, I think, on the second page, James, and this meeting is April 29th from 5 till 8 p.m. So I think that gives lots of people the opportunity to drop in, ask any questions that they have, and we'll provide snacks and tea and coffee. Stuff like that.
Is that the bottom of the page there? Because it says contact Mark or Linda, and it only has Linda's contact information there.
Yeah, no, mine's on the second page. At the bottom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So a little bit of the history on what we've done, and you know what we've done to date. I have been on site with First Nations, and I've started the consultation process to them. With Herb Alex. He really likes the plan. He provided me with a lot of history of what potentially could have gone on there. We did a bit of a walkthrough. He was talking about some of the works that they're doing in terms of you know, putting more fish, more salmon into the river stream and such, and how they're hoping that they're going to migrate up this way, which will provide an excellent viewing platform for where the Janelle Park is, to be able to see where their spawning sites are going to be. I mean, yeah, really, that's really cool. So yeah, so I mean, from that on, I've invited them to the meeting as well, to this meeting. If they want to attend, I haven't heard anything yet. It's not imperative at this point, but you know, the fact that we're starting off on the right foot with First Nations, I think is pretty good way for us to go. And we're just kind of doing our diligence, right? Like what we would think best practices would be in, you know, ecological surveys, First Nations assessment, archaeological surveys and that kind of thing, and we're just kind of moving through the process. So I think that once we're done here with the, with this meeting, we're going to move on from there to work with the consultant, eventually ink a contract with them in terms of moving forward, and hopefully be out to tender by Christmas, and then hopefully shovels in the ground in 2026.
Pretty exciting.
If everything goes accordingly. But there's a lot of working parts to this that you're not seeing, like dealing with MOT on the roadway going in and all this kind of stuff with water and sewer, that kind of thing. So, and
Yeah, I had a specific question regarding Indigenous consultation, and I'm wondering, I know Our Balance is working with the SNAICS group. Are we obligated to be consulting, I guess this would go to the plan, with other Indigenous groups? How does that work? Or is it a requirement? I'm just wondering as far as provincial requirements and such.
James can answer you.
Okay.
Attempt to. It's an interesting ground. We had a lot of conversation on where do we go, who do we sort of talk to, because there's not there's the guide and who to talk to where and how we're developing it. So we're kind of we're working with, I'd say at this point, I think with Anitra a little bit, and her contact she's had with the provinces. She's trying to create a bit of an umbrella First Nations kind of contact and things. So it stood out that in this case, one of the stronger groups of interest that have displayed the interest, we're connected with. So that's where we're attempting. I think it's one of the areas where, again, as a whole, we've decided, it's better for us to reach out and try and engage with people as much as we can. And they think you could just kind of keep going and never end in piece of string. Kind of thing. So we're kind of learning as we go. But I think the SNAICS and the work Mark started with her, it's consistent with what we've been seeing in other topics and things with the regional district in this area. And we'll keep working forward. We're working with some other First Nations on some of the emergency management things here, but that's a bit more structured and prescribed. Whereas our own projects are a bit, try and engage with people you can. It's not like a mandated thing through permitting or anything. So it seems to be going well, and I think we're just looking to get like positive engagement where we can, rather than at this moment in time. It's not prescribed to us as a regional district that we must consult with particular groups.
But I wondered whether it was through provincial authorities that we required to. Mm-hmm. But that's great. Okay.
Yes, through the work that I do with the First Nations around the basin, I've read a lot of the documentation and the requirements put forth by the province, and it says consult with local First Nation. Consultation with local First Nation is what it says, or First Nations. And because we don't have any, and in some cases around the basin, because there's no reservation land, prescribed reservation land, which we don't have in our regional district, then that means whatever the local First Nation is, that would be the one that you would have to consult with, not tell them, but consult with them on what might be happening and how you feel. It will go through the it will go through the channels, and I believe Herb will probably be speaking with the Ktunaxa because they're the closest other band around here. So I would definitely think that the message will get out if it hasn't already.
Terry?
Thank you, through the chair. What's the public feedback on this park? Is it's favorable?
It's it's mostly, usually as usual, you don't hear a lot from the people in favor of. It's a few that are worried because they feel it might cause more traffic in an area, or it might, specifically on Second, going down from past the hall and down across the tracks, and then Grandview, which is a small cul-de-sac area at across from where the park would be. And quite frankly, the temple, the big bulk plants there, and there's big trucks going in and out of there. It's not like they're not getting traffic now. Nothing's going on their road, and the big trucks still go down there, and plus the people that work in that office go up and down there. So it's really not going to be more traffic. It's just, I think it's more folks that don't want to see any change. They don't like change. They want to keep it themselves.
My backyard.
Yeah, exactly.
You get that every now.
Sure it is.
Yeah. Try proposing a giant substation next to your property. Anyway, what about the ONA? Haven't they opened an office in Castlegar?
They may have, well,
Like a while ago, Linda, like a
Yeah.
couple years ago.
I don't know if it's still an active office or not. Herb Alec was with ONA
Yeah.
for a long time. He still has open channels with them. That's why
Okay.
I believe he will
Be a
consult.
conduit.
I know that the ONA was contacted through the work I'm doing with Stream Markets on that committee for the Rickard Ridge group, project. And the ONA, stepped in on that one, before being consulted. They weren't consulted. I asked in a call with Frank Brasco about that. And he said, oh, well, we haven't contacted, we didn't know we had to contact. And I said, yes, you do. So somehow, because it's business, and the ONA is very, or the Assuris band, it's not the ONA, the Assuris band is very, very involved. Their leader is very forward thinking when it comes to business and development. He got wind and he kind of stepped in. So I believe, from what I've read the documentation, it said consult with the local band,
Yeah.
the most known local band. So,
And for my part, I think all of this, when we did our Creekside Park plan, we were looking at getting Columbia Basin Trust Fund. One of the criteria was First Nation contact. We contacted all of them that even remotely could be ONA, Kanaha, Snacks, and they all said they're very busy. Everybody's trying to consult with them. They wouldn't say yes or no, and they wouldn't even say that they saw anything wrong with it. They just, that was their answer. Thank you for sending us the information. And apparently that's standard. They just say, thank you for the information. And certainly, if it's something really they'll contact you right away. So we haven't heard anything, so.
but if I could supplemental on that one, is that, with the contact with the Sinixt in this case, and Herb Alex doing an archaeological check and for anything that could be here in their heritage. If he finds something that is related to another group, then he would then get hold of them and say, look, I found a Silkanagan piece of pottery or something, and that would get them involved. But someone's doing it. Someone is doing it. There's a First Nation involved, so they would be obliged to then consult with anyone or talk with anyone else related at that point.
And just to follow up too, Bill, you do know that when Mark and I found those gazebo arbor designs, they came directly from the Tanaha. Okay.
Yes, and then just to share, we also reached out with this being essentially funded and really a project that we're able to do because of CBT. We asked them about their first engagement kind of rules or practices if they've got a lot of communications with that, and they didn't have any preferences or group specific requirements. They said no, whatever we would do for projects. So we try to connect where we can and say, anyone that we should. So I think we're covering as many bases as we can while still also trying to move along with the project. And the archaeological kind of assessments and things is really the only one that might trigger specific requirements for engagement and so on, but we're not seeing that at this moment.
And you hire a specific First Nation company, you don't maybe, but someone hires a specific First Nation company that normally does the ARC assessment, because that's what Fortis did, and now Fortis has a pause on theirs next door to me because of something there.
It's an either or. We often approaches with this side or the other side of the hill. We're generally collaborating with the First Nations group when there's archaeological studies and work to be done, and sometimes it's an independent archaeologist, but generally we're trying to be informed and work with an archaeologist that the First Nation group are also supported by. Goes a long way.
Okay. No other questions?
Great plan.
Okay, yes, coming along. East End Services Committee through the verbal report.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Ally. All in favor? Carried. Okay, Integrated Watershed Service, Donna Dean.
So do you want me to speak?
Take it away, yes.
So I provided this report with a bit of background information about the Boundary Integrated Watershed Service and how that came about. And then I have some suggested questions that this committee might want to consider before going ahead. And from what I understand, there's funding's been approved to do a feasibility study for the service. I do have a little bit more information, and there was a mail out that was done in 2018 prior to the referendum that established the service. And it talks about the need, what would the question was on the referendum, and the tax implications of the next steps would be, if you're interested in that.
Sure.
And
Is that, I didn't see that in the agenda. Is that?
No, I just
Can you-
found that.
Yeah, can you email that PDF?
I can.
Yeah, because there's two members here that aren't Mike and Frank.
Mhm.
So I think they would appreciate seeing that PDF. If you could do that through the chair, I'd appreciate that, or Laura. Okay, okay.
Good afternoon.
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
Just take mine off and then I'll pass.
I'll let Donna finish.
So you can see, and you know, of course, the tax implication would be really different because that was for the boundaries area. But they were, you know, it's fairly minimal. So at the first, it was when it was established, it was $160,000 maximum. And you can see on a $500,000 property, that was about $25 per household, or per property. So, and that was done at the time when that service established bylaw was done. It was for a 5-year term. And then the members had to vote and support that going forward. So now that clause has been taken out of the service establishment bylaw, so it will continue forever. So it was kind of like a test for those first 5 years.
Got it. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, no, Ally was first.
Okay.
So thanks for this, Donna, some good information there. This idea was kind of born at Rural Summit in Kelowna last spring, about a year ago exactly, with this document here and with a presenter that I would never remember his name. And so it was kind of born from this document right here. And this document was first shared at a board meeting in Grand Forks last October or something like that. Where the Beaver Valley Water people, first of all, started to talk about this. And first, we expressed our interest in moving forward with the watershed protection, mostly based on this document here. And while I know I have made reference, and so have others, to the Boundary Water Service, I think we might do it for different reasons. This document indicates there are provincial funds available for startup anyway. I don't think for continuation of it. And I'll share this link. So I have shared this link and I've shared this document a couple of times with people. So while, you know, we do reference the Boundary Advisory Board because they've been doing such good work forever, I think we have slightly different reasons, yes and no, for wanting our own. I mean, I think when they established their Water Advisory Board back in 2012, 2014, certainly our world has changed a lot since then. And there's some questions that you put that came from, I think, this letter here. Main concern, like, what are your main concerns? If I could just speak to some of those implications that were in their main concerns would be climate change, increased need to support growing local and increased interest from the Americans on our resources, particularly water. That's a concern. You know, what's the maximum requisition? I mean, I think it's a bit too early to know what that is. Will we hire somebody? You know, a bit too early to know that. And I know there was a referendum that was done because of complications of using gas tax money. That's what was in this? That's what I read in the report, that the reason for the referendum was there was complications to use gas tax money.
Well, it was complicated to carry on just using gas tax because you didn't have somebody that was a permanent employee. It was a contract.
Okay, I misunderstood your reference there. I thought it was, there, doesn't matter, I'm unclear on that now. So I think some of the questions in there are like tax implications, like no idea at this time. You know, we've kind of gone around the table, and I think everybody around the table had an expressed interest in protecting their watershed. But, you know, I think our reasons might be slightly different than the boundary advisory. I mean, they've had drought conditions for a long, long time. Well, we don't want to get there. And like in our watershed, we've got 150 licenses on a stream this long with different logging companies coming in and out all the time. We're not in regional district, the land's in central Kootenai. We've tried to address that. So we have some complications that I think from the Fruitvale water system, we were wanting to be proactive in protecting our watershed. So, you know, speaking on behalf of our own system, those were sort of some reasons that we wanted to move forward with it. And again, it's based on what we learned at this summit in Kelowna last year. And it's watershedSecurity.ca. And it says that there's provincial monies available. The BC government needs to make a decisive move forward to establish a system of local watershed boards. Anyway, if you don't have this, Donna, I'll just tell you that interest back. You don't want to hang on to this one back.
I can make that one. I'll give it back.
But really, really good links in there, and it sort of explains how to set it up. So I think, you know, it's like, if we are going to set it up, what does it look like? Do we each have our own? Is it one for the Lower Columbias? And that's kind of where we haven't really got to yet, right?
That's your next, as soon as Ali's.
I think that's my ramble for now.
Okay. Andy.
Yeah, I just certainly have mentioned it to staff and to council. But these questions you're asking here, Don, are great because they provide a bit more information as to what, you know, what potentially we would be looking for. And understanding the boundary mostly related to the fact that they share water systems across the boundary with obviously the Kettle and the Granby. Unlike our water systems on this side, everybody has their independent access or source of water. So I'm not sure that you know, it's something. I mean, we recognize the need to protect our own watershed better than what we are, and of course, for all the same reasons that you are protecting, right? We've got other interests. We've got logging as well occurring. We have recreational users. We've got a limited supply. We rely totally on groundwater and reservoirs to support our community. So it'll be interesting to see that. It's great that we're having a conversation about it because, to be honest, it's one of those things that as long as water continues to come out of the tap, people are fine. They don't ask questions. But, you know, when we start putting in level 3 and 4 water restrictions or higher in the summer, where we have, you know, a mining proposal that's looking for water that is in, you know, in a finite resource that we know is a challenge, we're concerned. So I appreciate the opportunity here, and I'm not exactly sure how on a regional basis we can, or East End basis, we could work together on it, but more questions. More questions.
I know that everybody else have a chance before I get back.
Of course, that's my turn.
I'm a gentleman if you would like to.
No, not at all.
Okay.
I do want to address Randy's comments, but
Good. I shared all this information with the staff at City Trail. They're going to send somebody hopefully to the sessions in Grand Forks. With this right here, I'll be sharing this with staff. They're interested. They just want to know like everybody else. But basically what it boils down to was going to cost. So it's in their wheelhouse right now. So, well, I think it's getting into that trajectory.
Yeah.
Ali?
yeah, thanks. Of course, those are the questions. And remember, this started with the Fruitvale water system. Then it went to the East End. Then it went to the board. It's been all over the place. But the Fruitvale water system has already decided on our own, we want to do something. But I'm thinking, you know, let's just say we hired somebody for the Lower Columbias, like a Christina Anderson, that we could find her, but I think his name is Bill Cody. Anyway, I think the principles of managing a watershed would be applied the same. So if I'm only thinking out loud, if it was a shared service, the principles, okay, here's your specific concerns. It could still be a shared position that works for 3 different sheds or something like that. Just, that's what I was kind of envisioning in my head, what it might look like.
James?
You think what Donna put together of the questions, and here there's a number of ideas, but I think that there's an element before we can productively kind of take sort of the next steps is really that second bullet. What is the objectives of the service from a regional perspective? Do we establish kind of the service at this table? And that's for a watershed, kind of service. Most of the dialogue that I've heard around is the protection and preservation of water systems.
Insert the word proactively.
Yeah.
Protect.
And so I think, again, it's what are your time goals and interests? And I think if the stronger interests are around the protection of your water systems, then I think that has a significant impact on the value of us looking at watershed type service, thinking of the boundary model and all of that, because I would say there's 2 distinct areas. If those become your real priorities and objectives, is the supply of fresh drinking water and the management of that. Those tools and things are really, and Donna can jump in, there's a smaller relationship that the boundary has with that rather than it being a major part of the objective. So if it would look at, we want to be cognizant of that, because otherwise you spend a lot of money to look at the whole of watersheds, which may be a less of a priority for us over here, where the focus is in protection of water systems. And again, as municipalities and so on, a lot of that work is often done through the utilities side of things rather than kind of a broader service. So I see that there's good early steps, but whether it's a bit like Janine's,
Okay, I don't see that you recognize it.
whether it's like Janine's view for having the whole thing on the weed control, which is take it away to the community, spend some time, come back if you want to participate. I think maybe hearing back from each community, like what are your priorities, and does this all fit as a regional model? And then we could answer that over the next couple of months. It is then maybe it does fit more with Beaver Valley kind of approach and a water service by water service approach. But I think we can answer those questions if we go through kind of the that individual kind of review. But to say there isn't a right way to do it, we're just looking for feedback at this point.
Yeah, I would say the objective would be the proactive protection and security of our watersheds would be a simple objective. And I just want to be careful with us comparing to the boundary advisory thing. I think for necessity, because of extinct rivers and drought conditions, they had a much higher need immediately, way before we did, but we don't need to wait till we get there. And so I think we have slightly different purposes, like the creation of might follow a template with some technical reviews and that sort of thing, but the purpose is slightly different. But we don't need to wait till someone comes and steals our water or until we don't have any anymore.
Did you want to say anything before I jumped in?
I was just going to say one thing, that
Sorry, James.
Area B, we only have one community, which is Janelle, that actually has riverbank filtration system from the Columbia River. It takes 3 years to get from the river through the filtration of the sand, the riverbank filtration process, and to go to our 3 wells in Janelle. All the other 7 other pocket communities in Area B are all fed with upper level streams, China Creek, Over Creek, Bluebird Creek. Yeah, so it's sort of a split. So just protection of the watersheds, like doing everything we can to protect our waters. Utmost importance, whether it be the river or it be which I'm working on peripherally, or or the other.
I gotta let James jump in and then I'll, James, before.
So, and again, I just want to check because I'm here, not trying to dive in too much to the very specifics, but hear a conversation based around discussion of water systems, but we're using the word watersheds, and I think there's to me there's a strong differentiation, and watersheds would be a huge service. It's environmental health, it's habitat, it's all kinds of things, stream side protection and so on. That on one hand has absolutely a kind of a disconnect to a water system. There is a relationship between, but there are watersheds. If we did a regional, East End 7 service, has a lot of watersheds and areas that would have less impact to a water system and so on. And there's a connection of everything. So again, I think being cognizant of where do we want to focus. If it is watersheds, it's a lot broader. If it's watersheds or that affect and have direct influence in management and water systems, is a different area of focus. So I think definitely one for us to unravel a bit. Otherwise, we go off and we provide information back to you at some point that's maybe targeting a whole kind of area or cost that really isn't meeting what you're actually after.
But, did you want to jump in? Or?
Just, and I guess a question back to you, Donna. The province obviously has regulation legislation around protection of not only community water systems, but water drainages, sheds. But I would want to know whether we're trying to reinvent a wheel that's already there. And how does that differentiate from what the boundary does when it comes to obviously all the regulations that the province requires?
Right, so if you're talking about the watershed, for example, the Rothland
Right.
watersheds, the community watersheds that go up along the highway there, or down from the height of land, it's mostly, the biggest impact would probably be the forestry activities that are happening there, so that's heavily regulated.
Right.
It doesn't always work perfectly, as we know.
Yeah.
And so the watershed council, in the boundary area, it has a number of representatives that sit at that table, including forestry and mining, agriculture, and a whole bunch of different groups that sit there. And so the discussions that happen, they're all exposed to the educational opportunities that happen, and they can have those discussions. And so I think it has had some positive influence on what's happening in watershed. And this is all part of the Columbia River watershed, and then we have the sub watersheds within it. And I think everything that happens up to the height of land will all influence what happens in water services. The challenge here, I think, is with the Beaver Valley one, because the watershed, Kelly Creek watershed, is outside of our boundaries. It's in central Kootenai, and so I don't know how that would work, how...
I would see them just being part of the board, right?
Right. So, and
it's not made up of elected people, it's persons of interest, right? And so that would include people from Central Kootenai.
right, and so it could include potentially the logging, the operator there at Kelly Creek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I may jump in, I did have a few questions. Is that okay? I noticed in the report on the Kettle River that funding is only through CD&E. Does that mean none of the municipalities have provided anything?
Oh, no, that's not correct. I don't know where you saw that, but it's the three municipalities and the 3 electoral areas.
Oh, okay.
They're all
Because
participants.
on one of the things that I tagged on, when I said Kettle River, I saw funding primarily through CD. So, okay.
That's not-
So my next question on that, the parcel tax, is it a flat rate or was it a requisition rate?
Based on assessment.
Oh, based on assessment, okay. And if they're not in the watershed, like let's say, I'm thinking of Christian Valley or whatever it is, halfway to Suyas, they wouldn't be on it. It's only the people in the watershed.
Yeah, so it's all the the Kettle River watershed, and that does go up to Christian Valley, so that's the main stem of the Kettle River, and then the West Kettle goes up to Beaver.
Okay, I didn't know, I just, is there anybody outside of the watershed
There
that,
is,
and they're not on the requisition?
and they are. So,
They are.
So it includes all of electoral area E. There's a small area, I can't remember how many hectares, but in the Sidley Mountain Road area, you know, when you're driving to the
Yeah,
ways,
yeah.
you go over the height of land, and then you're still in the RDKB, but you're in the drainage that goes into the Okanagan, so they are included. And we did have a separate study there, we had a drought management plan done,
Yeah.
and that was done under Christina, that was done for that area, so they are included.
Okay, so the second question, what I read was drought, but was there a flood part of the watershed in the Kettle River as well? Flood
So,
control?
absolutely, like it did focus initially on the drought, but
Couldn't find
we
the
had,
flood. It was there somewhere. I'm sorry if I missed it.
okay, so that was included in the action items of
Okay.
the Kettle River Watershed Management Plan. There are 59 actions, and so that does relate to the floodplain mapping. So we've had like just over 5 or 6 years now at $160,000. We've probably matched and had more money come from the province and the federal government for floodplain mapping updates. It's been over $2 million that's come in.
Because it comes back to your discussion, James, it's about a utility or water service, but I'm going to bring up a couple of things. In the village of Fruitvale, we've just done through a grant a flood mapping program for the village of Fruitvale. And what caused me some concern is beyond that, as we call it, the Fruitvale bathtub or the Beaver Valley bathtub. It's a marshland upriver from Fruitvale that collects all the water and slowly allows it to flow out. That's all private land. And if it's ever filled in, then the flooding is going to get worse in Fruitvale, not better. And so I believe that the watershed management has to look at a holistic point of view. And there's wells too. So if you allow one large company to go in and suck down the water level or the aquifer, then that's going to be a problem. You look what's happening in California. It's the same thing. They don't have a watershed management plan. And the water level for wells has gone deeper and deeper and deeper every 10 years to actually get sustainable water. So it goes beyond just utility service. And I have been involved as an emergency manager in trail, and the Gulch and the Gulf River, I can't remember the name of it, and the Trail River has flooded several times. And that's all because there's no management of the watershed of the two rivers that can cut through Trail. The Trail has no authority to handle that.
I mean, Trail Creek.
Trail Creek, right? What's the other one? Not the Gulch, it's,
The Gulch is Trail Creek.
there's two creeks.
The one up here.
Yeah, it went right through and right downtown and straight in there. Yeah, I can't remember the name of this creek though.
Was it the one from the
That was,
the Vineland Lake?
no,
That's
no,
Cambridge.
but that was 3 feet of water going downtown Trail. And all it was the fact that we had it was worse than we had, the ground did not freeze. So we had a bunch of snow, the ground didn't freeze, and because of that, when the snow started to melt, the ground went with it. So and I don't know if we could have had that, but I think the whole idea I'm trying to say is when you start looking at what's happening above you as a municipality, you just don't know. And with a watershed thing, you can start to get input back. I mean, Fruitvale Reservoir, our Beaverville, our reservoir filled up with dirt the same year. So I'm just trying I'm not trying to sway the committee, but I'm trying to say when you go back to your municipalities, it's not just water, it's what's happening above you and having the knowledge of what's going to happen above you. Out in Champion Lakes, I went out there and it was just one house and basically a whole football field worth of live trees and every side was logging. This was an area that had not had been logged, but basically 2 football fields of ground gave away in a mountainside and took out all the water systems for 2-3 households. Yes.
So the work that we started to do with Bill Cody, with Roslyn Streamkeepers and Living Lakes Canada, they've reached out to us and offered to do some studies that I believe were covered with federal provincial money. Not quite sure where that was at, but Bill Cody looked into that, like what they're offering lining up with what we want to do here. And he said, is kind of like getting some data to lay some groundwork for a watershed board or committee. So I'm not quite sure. I was working with Goran's gone and Janine about engaging this group, I think out of Nelson, I can't remember, to do some preliminary technical work ahead of, regardless of what we do, but it's, I thought it was funded money. And so Bill Cody said nothing to do with this, but be good stuff to have ahead of what you want to do here.
So where do we go from here? What I'm reading from staff is that we go back to the municipalities with these questions to see if there's further interest. And the thing is, what I'm trying to say, it's not necessarily just the utilities of providing water, it's what's happening above your town.
It's watershed
Valley, much. Yeah. What are the objectives from your point of view as a municipality? For Linda, you're spread out all over the place. So you might have 3 or 4 different views on each one of the importance of it. For us in the Beaver Valley, it's quite simple. We're stretching into another regional district, but then there's Juanita. So I mean, for area A. So is that what you're asking us, for us to go back to municipalities and see?
I think, and John can jump in, I think that's a reasonable, kind of next step. To me, it's the interest of looking at it as a whole kind of watershed-based, kind of service. The one of the ones is, I know the questions can go up. Well, what would it be doing? What would it cost? It's almost a chicken and egg kind of thing. It's like, well, it's going to cost based on what your objectives are. However, having had the boundary example where the objectives might be slightly different, for us to move anything forward as a regional service, I think it's fair to say we would be hiring a staff person. And so based on the boundary, you'd probably be looking at minimum 160 plus sort of other sort of expenses to get a person, vehicle, and that work going. And then potentially, some significant assessments, early on, of some of the watersheds where there may already be some complementary work. So another 50, 60,000 for some study work and consultants in the first year, potentially. So we could probably provide some numbers and say, look, as a single service, looking at watersheds for all 7, you've got a minimum cost X. Transit is our best example of we're all participants in the service. So that gives us the assessed value distribution between everyone. So we could give you a kind of a number and say, look, as a basic model for a regional service, you might be looking at X minimum startup cost to provide the resource, and that will give some capacity for a range of objectives for that person to then be working on. Because I recognise for certainly a lot of the other administrations to help yourselves is well, what cost are we talking about if we're in a regional service? So we could maybe just give you a real ballpark number based on that. If that's helpful for you, we could provide that as a takeaway from this just through email, just for the conversation if folks think that's useful.
Linda, then Ali?
Yes, Ali brought up Bill Cody because we've both been working with him for a number of years, and he did the models for the Trail Creek area, area B area, Rossland, did that model for that. And, I'm just supporting him on this grant and aid I just filled out for $5,000 for hydrology network station monitoring. This gentleman has done so much preliminary work and has such a great knowledge of both the Beaver Valley, rural Brittville area, and our Lower Columbia, including Rossland, which is Lower Columbia. So he's got a lot of information. He's already got a head start on things, and I would really like to see some consideration on including him if we're going forward, because he's done a lot of the with Living Lakes Canada. He works tandem with them, and actually this grant maybe is for Living Lakes Canada because they're involved with everything he does. So it's important that, you've got the connections, which is amazing. So I would certainly recommend and hope that he'd be involved, cut back on some of the costs.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I too have funded the same grant need Linda's just filling out for 2 hydrology stations in the Beaver Valley water system. And I think Donna threw out a $25 per household for the boundary. Maybe they've got more people than we do. I think we said as a requisition approximate, but that would be nice to have a real comparison, whether it's transit or whatever, so that, you know, you're not going back to your council's blind, what does it cost? I don't know. But having a per 100,000 is a good measure to take back to your councils. But I mean, I just, oh, and Donna, I'll leave this with you maybe to get a copy of it, but I sure want it back. But it does say in here something about provincial money being available, I believe, for startup. And, you know, if we can't raise food and water to number 1 and 2 services, I don't know what we're doing here.
Okay.
And that's what just then for schedule of things. Do we want to leave it sort of a couple of months to sort of come back, or do we want to try and have this on the agenda next month to say what have people heard? So just timing wise, just looking at guidance.
My personal opinion as the chair, I think we should defer it to June, because there's 2 directors didn't get on board, so we'll have to contact them to make sure that they know what they're bringing their municipalities on. But if people want to bring it back to May, then we can fast track it. Okay,
Yeah, my only concern is if we get to June, then we're in a summer break, right? And I'd sure like to know what we're doing before the end of the year as we head into another budget cycle.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm happy to, I'll contact them.
Okay, you contact Mike, I'll contact Frank. Is everybody okay with me?
And I think Frank got a copy. It seems to me I left the website for that document with you and Frank at the Grand Forks meeting. How about Donna, if you copy that, do you mind sending it out to everybody as a PDF?
Yeah.
Then we all have, you know, where did this bike, where was it born from that document? And that's will be helpful. I'll contact Mike and you contact Frank.
Were you there with Frank? Okay. Did you want to contact Frank and talk to him about it?
I have no idea where Frank is.
Italy.
Italy, okay.
Oh, is he? Yeah, he's here. He's away right now.
I don't mind talking.
Tell him in a week or 2.
No, I'll talk to Frank, you talk to
Sure, yeah.
And it's Gorge Creek.
Gorge Creek. Not Gulf Shine, that was close. It started with a G, yeah, the Gorge Creek, yes, I remember it quite well. I got nearly court-martialed because I called out the army without authorization.
Whoops.
And I had Mayor Dieter Boggs phone the province and phone the army saying, "What are you doing?" And they backed off when a mayor talked to them. Anyway, I'll never forget that flood. Okay,
I'll make the recommendation, which is receiving the report here.
I'll second.
yeah, and all in favor, carried. All further that the staff send out an email to the directors asking them to review the implications that are made in the report, but it will go with a possible fee, whatever you call it.
I call it a concept budget.
Yes,
Based on a single staff person.
yeah,
That will be brought back to the main meeting.
yes,
Okay, part of the motion.
yes, part of the motion. Thank
I
you.
heard you say that.
Yeah, that's right. You want to say that again? You got it.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Donna.
Thanks, Donna.
You're welcome.
And I guess you can just stay there except stand up and turn around if you want to take a break. You need a break?
That's okay.
Okay. On to South Kootenai Green Lake Active Transportation Plan. Donna Dean.
I have a copy of it. Okay, great. Thank you.
It's on my
Well, it's right over there.
I guess it's because I don't have a certificate.
Oh, there it is.
So this was a request from a couple meetings ago from your East End Services to come back and discuss how we might do the implementation of the active transportation plan. So we have finalized the plan. There were a few edits that had to be done. Now the consultants completed that. It's on the website. So I'm looking for endorsement of the plan, so I would take it to the board of directors and ask for their endorsement of it. And that's a critical bit for being able to apply for funding to make the implementation happen for pieces of it. So what I've done is I've listed the 8 segments of it, the jurisdiction, the length, and the preliminary cost estimate, and that's minus the contingency, because the consultant put a 40% contingency, which made those numbers look really scary. So hopefully we're not there in those numbers, but it does have a pretty high numbers, like they are pretty substantial, and the total being over $43 million. When I look at this, like just looking to you, Andy, Red Mountain part and Rockland part, those are partially done, or your staff is constantly going after funds to do those portions.
Well, Red Mountain, of course, a Centennial Trail, we just received close to $1 million to do upgrades, mostly for accessibility. Wonderful.
Yeah.
But the Roslyn to Area B, which would be down to the golf course, basically was updated 2-3 years ago now. So that's completed as far as I know, with general maintenance on an annual basis. And then the section from from Warfield to the golf course, basically through Area B. We are, I think, actively looking for grant opportunities there. So, and also a realignment of that particular to support our wastewater line that runs through that area, and to make it more user-friendly down to the rail grade. Yeah. So that is what Roslyn is working on thus far, that section of it.
And is the village, the city staff doing that?
Planning, yes.
Or is it some other society?
No, that's planning. That's not KCTS. They're not involved in this particular project.
Okay, thank you. Hallie, you had something?
Yeah. In this table you've got here, Donna, the sections that we've got identified there, and we haven't got to talk about funding models yet, but Area A is named in the pretty much the majority of the trails, with probably the most kilometers of anybody, which gives me great concern. I'll just leave it there for now.
So what, can I jump in? Nobody else's question? When you said you got grant funding, was it 50-50?
No, it was more than that. Definitely, it was higher percentage
Of the grant money?
Yeah, and I can't remember exactly what that number. Yeah, and I remember, like, currently this project that we're doing on Centennial is almost 100% funded now. That was also CBT contributions and RMI money too, Resort Municipality money, if I remember right, that's bringing that together. But it's really high percentage, especially if it's active transport. And Donna, you probably know this, that the grants being provided are quite highly funded by provincial.
Donna, if we could go back to your $43 million project.
Figure.
And that's coming from the consultant.
Right.
Based on all the,
And a 40% contingency plan included as well.
no, that was not included.
Okay, so 43 million. I don't know if I could get Foodville to approve this, but they might consider if there was if we could see the 70-30 split. Follow what I'm saying?
Yes, I do understand what you mean, and it'll vary depending on.
I know, I realize that, but are we gonna use a 50-50 or 70-30? What is, I mean, it's a guesstimate, because if Fruitvale waits till 2035, the 6.8 million will be 10 million. I mean, there's an inflationary factor on that, but I when I see that, I see $7 million from Fruitvale with a little bit of Area A or whatever helping out, and that's unaffordable. I don't think we could support the plan. But I'd have to sit the village. Terry, minute, Alex.
So, thank you through the chair. we're just what you're looking for is for us to endorse this, to get it to the board to be endorsed,
Correct.
to be the ability to possibly apply for some funding. We're not committing to any funding in this point, because if that was the case, I would be lynched.
Yeah.
So just put that out.
Ally?
Yes, except, like I said last time, a long time ago, this group of municipalities sat around this table in a joint recreation and things that we're going to improve your hall, then we're going to do yours, then we're going to do yours, then we're going to do yours.
Some of this.
And then the divorce happened before we got to yours, but yours had already been done. So yours were never going to get done, so wait for your luck. So I think the funding model, what it is important right now. My question remains, who is this for? Like 5 people who can afford $5,000 bikes? Area A is in half of the kilometers here. Area A's got half of the kilometers and we've got 1,900 people. I will not ask them to pay for this.
Through the chair, these numbers need those distances and where they fly. They have to be refined more. And that's something I'm gonna go back to the consultant with because it wasn't entirely clear on those segments. If you look at the maps of those segments,
Yeah,
where it starts and ends, like where
I
they,
found that hard.
yeah, so that is something that has to be refined more. And then within those segments, there's different treatments and some that are less expensive than others.
Just the same, my question was not hypothetical. My question remains, who is this for?
Just correction.
And I want an answer to that.
Okay, I couldn't, just wait, the only other thing I read in the report, when I did read it, and because I was reading a lot over the weekend, I missed it, but I didn't see a maintenance cost of who has, or like, based on our knowledge of Kootenai Trail Society and how much we're doing on maintenance of that, I think we should have had at least some estimate of the annual maintenance cost. Like, once we build this $43 million, what is the add-on, follow-on cost for maintaining the routes? And was it in there?
No,
I will look again, but I don't think so. I think it was just about construction costs.
Yes.
The ongoing
And I think,
operations.
and I know I hate to throw more work on you, Donna, but if we could see, based on talking to Kootenai Columbia Trail Society, based on how many kilometers they have right now and their general average maintenance cost, could there be a correlation or a close estimate on the annual maintenance cost? I think that's important for us to know. Yes, and
So a couple of questions. One related to that specifically is obviously this is going to be mostly an urban trail. Even the section, when I look at what's happening between Rosalind and Trail, that's basically an old road corridor versus single track trails that are all over the place through the tree. And obviously, as we heard this year, it's going to be very expensive to get trails open because of especially at certain elevations, because of the amount of trees that came down over the winter. But as far as Ally's question about who is this for, well, we had initial discussions about what we were going to support as far as the Green Lake, and I know that Steve was at the table as an avid cyclist and could see, that it was not just the commuter trail, but that was certainly a principal part of it. And when you talk about active transportation opportunities, the province supports active transportation to augment, get vehicles off the road and provide people opportunities to get to and from work and community on bicycles, basically, whether electrified or not, and to reduce GHGs being spent driving up and down hills and from community to community. But then Steve, I remember, threw out the great potential for a tourism draw to have an access through our communities. So I knew that was part of his agenda at the time. And, I know for a fact that this section between Trail and Rosalind will be used quite a lot, certainly a lot more than 5 people. when it's developed up to its full capacity, it will be used quite a bit by our community and our residents and tourists as well that are coming to the communities. I don't know about, $43 million. We talked about, missing a great opportunity in this repaving project that went ahead last year in the City of Trail. It's too bad we didn't get some heads up to that a year or two previous, and we could have been way ahead at a fraction of the cost. But I see this as a wish list right now. I know for a fact that we didn't spend that kind of money on the section of trails thus far that have been completed. But when they threw out these figures today, nothing's a surprise anymore, right? So we just know that things are so expensive. However, unless we can get grant money to support it, there's no way we're going to do it. And to me, I'd like to see us approve this at the board level, and then just see how, with more detailed information from consultant, and see what the potential is for funding. And it likely isn't going to be there for the next couple of years. We know that, just with the austerity that's going on within our provincial government right now, and what's going on south of the border. So let's just, put it as a placeholder for the time being. And as things develop, when Trail, being the City of Trail being one of the communities that obviously it isn't going to be a trail. It's going to be an urban road, access for bicycles that'll be identified and signed. And I doubt it's going to cost $6.9 million, but who knows? Depending on how they develop it. It's existing roads in 90% of the places it's going through the community. Anyways, that's my suggestion. We do get it approved to the board level. Again, it's a placeholder. If there's funding comes available, great. We can look at the opportunity. But as pointed out, we don't have to commit to anything at this point.
Yeah, thank you. And absolutely, the contingency and the maintenance, getting grants are nice, but you still have to come in behind with the benches and the washrooms and the charging stations, and ongoing maintenance will always be a concern in there. I don't know how much grant money is available there. And don't forget, our bus shelters were up to $100,000 each for costs, right? And as far as getting a heads up for paving, you'll remember Steve and I met with MOTI and Katrina Conroy saying, please give us a heads up for paving so we can do, yeah, we sure will. They don't, and I don't know that they ever will. And, you didn't spend a lot of money on your section because there was already road there, right? But I think I need to rephrase my question. And when we had a little workshop in the old library with the consultants, Watt Consulting, on some final plan. There were some of us who attended a workshop there, those who were sat on the Green Link Committee. And they were saying the primary purpose is to commute to work. And I argued that it was for tourism as well. And no, the primary purpose is to get to work. So rephrasing my question, how many people will use this? Not who will use it, how many people will benefit? And we got 4 seasons, like someone's going to ride their bike to work from Trail to Fruitvale, like one. Anyway, I'm just not ready to, I don't know that I can commit to this plan at all, because we don't have food and water.
I think all relevant sort of, points, and I think what we're hoping to do is endorse it. Is that we got the investment back for active transportation to do the plan. Largely we've all participated in kind of looking at what the plan is. It's guided around the principles of active transportation, which generally is around moving people by not cars, bikes or other means on a network that we don't have. Whether we get partially there in a few years or small steps over many years is really our choice at the pace of implementation. So looking at endorsing that plan as we had all of that work done, and then really these other points that we might spend the next couple of years trying to, figure out. But at the end of the day, we have a plan. And if that's to give us a guide of anything we do next, or it just sits on the shelf, ultimately, we're again looking for the direction. Active transportation funding will come, and to these points, again, which one of those ones where to do any more work forwards, should the plan sort of be indoors, is trying to work out how do we approach it as an implementation strategy. Every each area could take away the pieces on their own and do it, right, as we talked initially, Rossland's already been very active in some of the work, or we could look at this as a complete joint service, and again, as next steps for us in terms of doing anything productive, whether that's very, very small steps or at a more significant rate, really has to be around piecing it out, community by community, or a holistic approach. So again, not today, but we're looking for some guidance from, if it's endorsed, is there any preferred way that the committee would like to look at with this? And again, suggest with these plans, there is the space to then get into the detail if we prioritise. Donna mentioned, and we said the detail's too much for now, like a corridor just Montrose to Fruitvale as a connection is identified, and that might surface as an early priority that we can develop and may have some benefits, and it could be developed I think with active transportation, there's some guidelines around the standards, but you could develop it from a low investment right up to a high investment. Still get the same thing and link. It really becomes down to what level that we want for the bike paths and the bikeways that we invest in if we do. So just asking if it's endorsed today, some consideration to those points 1 to 4. Not necessarily today, but is there any preference if we're moving this forwards, how people would like to see things done? Thanks.
I have a question through the chair to Rosalind. As Rosalind has actively been moving forward on an existing wagon road and have been already actively paying for some of that stuff on their own, why would Rosalind ever want to help pay for 24 kilometers in Area A? Through the chair to.
But, I mean, you're not paying for Roslind's.
Right, and so why would Rosalind agree to pay for Area A's section is my point.
Well, they can contribute if it's supposed to be a regional service, then.
Okay, I guess that's one of the questions that'll.
Watch that.
Linda?
Yes, and that was part of my point, was that Area B's got such a small little portion in there, from the golf course down, basically.
Right.
And I'm looking at the topography there, and there's maybe 7 months a year you could use it because of how it's in the gully and the snow that gathers down there and such. Do I believe in active transportation? Yes, I do. Do I think it's worth looking into and just seeing, saying we're not committing, as long as it's made clear in the verbiage that this is only for exploratory, if you will, no commitments are made at this time, but just to find out if we're going to be, what kind of funding we could get. And from there, I can see moving into then the question of how do you model this, or how do you, then you could, I just don't think, I think it's probably in today's times with the amount of how people are struggling with funding, and there's so many big projects we have going on that are taking taxpayer dollars, that we're not going to get the support from the taxpayers to do a regional model that's where everybody contributes into it, kind of thing. I think taxpayers are going to be saying, well, no, I only want to contribute toward this portion, the portion that my community, that my area or my municipality is supporting. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done. And I think just looking at this realistically through the taxpayer eyes, that's how I see it going. But I think there's no harm in exploring and seeing if there's any potential for any kind of large or full commitment by the province or something.
Okay, so, go ahead, sir.
If I may through the chair, I think one of the challenges having, we've got a recent example, it's Christina Lake, where we followed the same kind of model, different scale, and things, but active transportation planning grant. And then we were successful, just recently with funding for construction. In this particular scheme, I think one of the things we will be challenged with is without a detailed plan, resources and our own budget to complement with, and know where we want to be, investing some money. All of the schemes and things there with the province currently, if they continue, it would be very hard to kind of get if we just kind of tried to sort of dabble. So I think this is one of the ones where, if we make some decisions and it seems there might be some logic to kind of making kind of separate areas and priorities, potentially rather than a combined service, maybe not. That we should do some more work and some more planning, I think, is what we would see and recommend, such that at some point in time, maybe we said, right, here's a section that we're going to do some more detail. We're going to spend a bit more money refining a detailed plan to be a moderate investment, targeted a lot less than they've listed. I think they've gone to a higher standard of planning and concepts, and come up with a way that we see that we like to get maybe some missing links done that we might consider really important, and it might be just a few line items from the plan rather than the whole plan, and put some level to it that we could then go and look at grants, and we could still say, here's a plan and a concept in the Beaver Valley area. We're not committed, but here's a way we could fund it if we're successful with getting partnership grants. But we're kind of, I think, to be successful, like in Christina Lake, you've got to be ready to implement and have, if you're applying to the grant, you're ready to construct kind of thing. So I think we're a long way from that at this point. If that makes sense to folks.
Yes, thanks, James. And number one, we approved our active transportation plan within Fruitvale. We applied for grant funding and we got refused.
So the plan or for an action
For an actual project. For an actual project.
Okay. Well, I mean, we apply.
I know, but within council, you can see how, we went through this process and now we applied for it and we didn't get it. And it's like, why did we go through all this motion? So we've been told to apply again because everybody's applying. But anyhow, I'm just giving you the success in Roslyn and failure in Fruitvale. It could be the way we wrote it up. I don't know. I'm just telling you. Number two, what I'm taking away is the fact that you need the endorsement of the active transportation Greenlink plan in order to get grants. Okay, so can we put a subject in the approval, subject to the projects being predominantly funded through government grants and CBT?
The only concern I would have with that is that, again, you're limiting the opportunity to.
I didn't say all funding, predominantly.
Yeah.
Give me a wiggle room.
I mean, from a staff perspective, I would think that when you start putting restrictions on your financing options, you might be kind of screwing yourself when it comes to it being successful in the application.
If I think there's a nervousness to the dollar figures, understandably, there's something around the plan being endorsed with further work to be undertaken on looking at a financial implementation plan at a later date. So something to that effect that says we're endorsing the plan, but we're also saying we haven't yet developed a financial strategy to support that plan, and we'll do so later on.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
Yeah, it's good. Harry? Yeah. Alex?
I'm just again looking at the kilometers here. And between Roslyn, Warfield and Trail, there's a lot of wagon road stuff already there. Roslyn's looking at 10 kilometers-ish, Warfield 6, Trail 10-ish. And again, Area A is looking at 24 kilometers of participation, and it's about the ongoing maintenance and all that contingency stuff and the benches and the chargers. I unfortunately, I will not be able to support this. I could never ask Area A residents to pay for something that we don't know how many people are going to use. Kind of like what we talked about earlier about TRP cards, like how many people are using them. You know, that's important information that we want, right? How many people will use these trails? We don't know. And that's a lot of money on a we don't know. So I'm not going to be able to support this.
Okay, can you adjust the motion then to endorse? Can you read it back?
Yeah, so it'll be the second part under further that the East End Services Committee recommends that the Regional District of Kootenay Boundary Board of Directors endorse the South Kootenay Greenlink Active Transportation Plan, March 2025, with further investigation on developing a financial strategy as presented to the committee on April 15th, 2025.
So can I get a motion as amended? Perry? Andy? All in question?
Question?
Yes.
The motion, with an understanding that there's no commitment made at this time. Could we add that, please?
Yep.
I'm good with that.
I think that is a given.
So I like it stated though.
Yeah.
I want it stated. It's a
Plan.
yeah, it's a plan, but make it reiterate that there's no commitment made at this time.
Okay,
So I
so
would really feel more comfortable.
as can you read it out again, Laura? Thank you.
That the East End Service Committee recommends that the Regional District of Kootenay Boundary Board of Directors endorse the South Kootenay Greenlink Active Transportation Plan, March 2025, with further investigation on developing a financial strategy and no financial commitment made at this time as presented to the committee on April 15th, 2025.
Okay. In favor of the motion as amended? Okay, all in favor? Opposed?
Please record me as opposed and noting as well that 2 members of the committee are missing. The big decision to make without 2 of our members. I guess I'll have a chance at the board though.
Yeah. I'm assuming that Mike would have possibly opposed it and Frank would have been in favor of it. Probably. I'm assuming.
Warfield has no money. He's already said he's not supporting anything.
I was just making a general comment. I wasn't saying how they would go.
You would have been the deciding vote chair.
Yeah, I know that. Okay. And Donna, I'd really like to see an estimated maintenance cost of some form. I realized I jumped on the Kootenay Trail Society as an example, and it's not maybe a valid one, but something.
Yeah, it's complex.
Yeah, I think the thing unless we know what it is we want to do, where every single part of that plan has an option on how we can do it. The maintenance cost could go from $1 a meter to $1,000 a meter based on your design choices. And so I think that would be almost impossible for us to answer when we have no strategy over what we might. It's a bit where some of the plan is hard paving signage. Other parts of it,
Arbitrarily in the old world where I worked, we used to allocate 10% of the construction cost as the annual maintenance cost. So if I'm looking at 43 million, I'm looking at 4.3 million for maintenance. Tell me I'm wrong.
Can we take 2 minutes?
2 minute buying break.
Yeah, let's take a break, yeah.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, there has to be, I know engineers don't like putting down, but if you don't put down, the percentage, you know. So what I'm saying here is clarify, you gotta take 1% and say it's 1% of the construction cost on an annual basis, and saying that this is based on this figure, 1% of the construction cost. And then people can challenge you on it, but at least it's something other than saying nothing. The 10% we used to use was because all our facilities were used by soldiers that were disruptive. Yeah.
I'm trying to
Okay,
get an
yeah.
update from that.
Especially for court. Yeah. So 1% is a reasonable figure, is it not?
Yeah, I'm just from an engineer, and when I have zero idea of what we do. I would have like zero idea what it meant.
I realize that, but
So I think it's just, I think we're talking about so many details that we have absolutely no confidence over what we would do. If we went back to the consultant, they wouldn't be giving us a maintenance kind of thing, because it's really important what you're going to do and when you're going to do it.
yeah,
I think you could kind of break it down to say, significant employees. Well,
if it's a paved, middle last, probably,
Yeah,
except where this. So, but if it's a flat target trail.
The majority of shows you can do with line painting, and then you'd have some angle line painting.
Yes, yes.
So,
Well, that's what I'm saying.
or they could take the Class A standard, which would be multi-million dollars. So it's, you could say your maintenance cost is also, the range to this.
I'm just passing on what I'm getting more and more from our residents. When we build anything new, they want to know what's the maintenance cost.
Yeah.
And then we haven't been able to give it. So now I'm putting it in based on my going like that. And because of that, now people are saying,
I agree with you 100%. When we have a project and we have a plan, that we have an operation and maintenance cost, as we don't have capital costs like that here, I'd say if that's step 10, we're at step -5 kind of thing.
okay, but Roslyn has already done a couple of trails. What's the cost on maintenance?
Sure.
I'd have to ask,
Yeah,
I mean, it's,
anything's better than nothing. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying, Andy. I just,
yeah, I don't know. I mean,
if I don't get the maintenance cost, I don't know what I can do to support it.
well, and each section's gonna be different.
I realize that.
Yeah, but I mean, for you guys, my guess is the Montrose Fruitvale is gonna be your principal corridor as far as active transportation idea.
Yeah.
And coming up with a plan,
Yeah.
it would be interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of examples out there because there's trails all over in all kinds of communities across the province.
But there's gotta be somebody to give it a
Oh,
ball.
I'm sure.
That's all I.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Because that's, every new project we've been asking for and presenting for public input comes back, how much it's gonna cost to maintain it.
oh, yeah.
And,
Great question, and we need to factor that.
and,
Not to
I
mention,
just
it's like
feel,
in 50 years.
I just feel right now, we've got to put a ballpark on it. I don't care what it is.
Yeah,
And 10% is high. I was just trying to.
Yeah.
Done.
yeah,
But that's what we use in the army for army barracks.
right.
Training facilities was 5%.
10% may not be high if you're looking also at.
Yes.
So,
And it's something good to respond to.
Did you want to talk to me? Or were you just hanging out?
I just want to talk to you. No, I was just, I didn't catch.
Oh, okay. Good. That's really good there.
Oh, yeah, no, good, but I 100% agree with you.
Did I tell you that when?
99%. Oh. Well, they say you were a big lecture.
Yeah, I would have graveled that.
Oh, of course. Project. So you go see it out.
Yeah, Chase James.
Yes, yes. Where were you?
Started.
We just helped in college like that.
Trails.
Okay. Yeah.
Kind of like
When
always there.
Connected Trail, Roslyn.
Of course,
We're building Roslyn.
we have to sort of get through.
There's all it's all in Roslyn right now, but when we go through area B, who's paying the bill?
You did have to do that. Well, you can guess, they can say, oh, right after the budget.
Yeah.
That's all good.
Nice.
Gary said that.
They're often.
Finishing a project. Oh, yeah.
Well, greatest way on central sleeping.
Get it again.
Give it to us.
Makes sense.
Yes, Linda.
Have you seen, any grant need or any aid requests, money requests through your, for the, Roslyn Gold River Follies? For funding?
Yes, the CBT grant.
Yeah, but just since then,
No,
because we just committed a lot to our student, the ready grant.
yeah,
And now she's asking for another 6,500 from Mary.
just as a
Yeah.
how much did you give them
Well,
for?
we couldn't give her the whole amount.
No, we didn't give them the whole amount.
Yeah, 32 or something.
Okay.
And I thought, well, I can make up the rest of that name, but
Now she's asking for
they're asking for
6,000.
1,500 for the,
It's a win-win.
1,500.
Did you see their financials? This, I know that includes some of our decision around the table, because they had over 100 grand in the bank.
Okay, because the total cost of the project, that project they're asking 1,500 for is 127,000. You know, we only have, so every 11,000 in grant
Might get to wash them
in so far for that, but they're only asking. But they're asking for, what did we say? Ready now. We gave them 22,405. For, they asked for 33,190. And for, now she's asking for another 1,500 for one project, and then for lighting, we had a big discussion.
Yeah.
For the schools, and lighting and all that stuff, she's asking 25 grand. That's a lot of money, because she's only got, on that one, she doesn't have a whole lot of, I got
Yeah, we haven't unless there's something coming at the next meeting, but I believe that's on the agenda.
Down there, you go, so you can give it.
Again, tell me what's caught their financials are ready for this. We saw that they already had like 107 or 108,000. You know, I don't understand it. Yeah, so, but I mean, we gave.
I think we're ready. Oh, we gotta go get started. Okay.
I'm gonna make something grabbable. More than that.
Okay, okay.
We should have taken out.
No pressure.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get back to Ian here. Sorry for banging the gavel, I just didn't want to yell at people.
No, thanks for that.
Thanks for not.
Okay, so we stopped we got the time there done, and we're back on at 12 noon. Okay, late emergency items none. Discussions for future items for future agendas. You are receiving emails now with what's coming up in May and June. I remind the directors that if there's something that you feel is missing that should be brought up, you can email myself and the chair and Laura, and we'll add it in where we put staff us to do this project. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Question period for the public and the media. Is there anybody that has any questions?
Yeah, why did we not entertain the transit update in the regular meeting?
We're getting into that right now, number 10.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yes.
The delegation.
Yeah, delegate right now.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wondered why we didn't do the delegation at first.
It ties in with when we're going in camera. Back to back.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Are you okay with that?
I'm absolutely okay with it. And that makes sense when you realize this new camera.
Okay, so BC Transit update. Danica White, over to you.
Hello, just checking that you can see me, hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
All good.
All right. And can I share my screen, or will you scroll through this agenda package?
Hand it over to you to share your screen, and then
Okay.
it's all yours.
All right. Can everyone see it?
Yep, we're good.
All right. Thanks for having me. I'll start with our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge with respect that BC Transit delivers our mission on the ancestral territories of Indigenous peoples across British Columbia, and their historical relationship with the land continue to this day. So this morning, I guess it's afternoon now, I have a few updates to provide and some information about the local transit system, how it's been performing recently. And then, as you heard, we will go into an in-camera session afterwards. So I'm Dana Kowite. Hopefully some of you remember me. I'm the Government Relations Manager for the Thompson-Kootenay region. I'm the main point of contact for local government partners regarding all things transit. I work closely with James Chandler for the West Kootenay and the Boundary Transit Systems, and I coordinate the West Kootenay Transit Committee, which brings together elected officials and staff from the Regional District of Central Kootenay, Kootenay Boundary, and the City of Nelson. And I was on maternity leave last year, so you might have seen my colleague Elise, who was covering for me. And I look forward to returning to the Kootenays in a few weeks to the local government convention in Kimberley. So first thing I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of is that the West Kootenay Transit System has been selected as one of 33 systems in BC that was approved for funding from the baseline funding stream from the Government of Canada. It is important to note that this about $4 million money has been allocated over 10 years. Starting next year, and it will be split between all of the funding partners of the West Kootenay Transit System, which is the Regional District of Kootenay Boundary, Regional District of Central Kootenay, and the City of Nelson. And BC Transit is currently in the process of submitting the Phase 2 requirements of this funding, so things are still in progress. There's numerous steps to actually secure this funding, and we do have an election in between, so I wouldn't say it isn't secured yet, but the announcement has gone out, so we are feeling quite confident about it. We anticipate that the majority of this funding will be applied to fleet vehicle replacements over the 10-year period to support the significant capital expenditures required in this area. The cost of vehicles has increased a lot, especially since most vehicles were purchased sort of back in 2017. The cost of them has gone up a lot. So as vehicles are being replaced, costs are really going up. And a lot of this funding will be used to just stabilize lease fee costs for vehicles. The stream of funding is replacing the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, or ICIP funding. And prior to the introduction of baseline funding, BC Transit had pursued federal ICIP funding to offset the total cost of large capital investments, including the Downtown Trail Exchange. So I'll provide a quick overview of your local service. One thing I'll sort of want to keep in mind is that Service in Trail and Castlegar are delivered together under one contract. So some of the stats and updates I have include the routes that are delivered in Castlegar. Some of them I'm able to tease apart the data and just prevent sort of more local trail and area service. But some of these are for trail and Castlegar. So transit systems are primarily costed and compared by the number of hours the buses are in service each year. So this region, Trail and Castlegar, delivers 21,000 service hours for scheduled transit and 4,500 hours for handy-dart or custom transit. And delivering this level of service is cost shared with the province, who pays about half, as well as the Regional District of Central Kootenay, who pays for the service that's delivered in the Castlegar area. So the Regional District of Kootenay Boundary invested about $1.5 million into local transit for the most recent fiscal year. This works out to transit costs being about $160 per service hour to operate. So every hour that there's a bus on the road, the total cost is about $160. Each hour a bus is on the road, it delivers an average of 18 rides. And that works out to about a 13% cost recovery. And this is very similar to other small cities in BC. So these numbers certainly don't surprise me. I think 18 rides an hour is pretty good. Operationally, PWT was awarded the contract last year, and it's been a relatively smooth transition to this new operating company. All of the drivers are all the same, so a lot of the staff just transitioned to PWT. They're delivering 99.66% of service, so that means that there's very few scheduled trips that don't run. So this means that your transit system is very reliable and people can count on it. on-time performance is quite close to BC Transit's target of 73%. And the industry standard for on-time performance is a bus arriving anywhere between 1 minute early and 3 minutes late. And buses can sometimes be late for all the reasons that, sometimes people in vehicles are late. It can depend on the weather, on traffic, on construction, a lot of things that are often outside of the control of the bus operator. So in addition to the scheduled routes within Trail, there's HandyDART service as well, which is an accessible door-to-door shared transit service for people with permanent or temporary disabilities that prevent them from using traditional transit. So HandyDART picks customers up at their door and drops them off at the accessible door of their destination. So you have both services available in the area. So we'll quickly look at some ridership information. Again, I was able to drill down just into sort of trail area routes that the regional district funds. So the local transit system in and around Trail is providing over 200,000 rides in the 2024 calendar year. And these are for the routes of the 40 series as well as the 98. So many transit users are students, so we see ridership dip over the summer and peak in the fall. Typically, September and October tend to be the highest ridership months of the year. And we certainly see that here. If we look at some of the individual routes, we see some pretty big differences, but it's not an apples to apples comparison. Some of these routes only run 4 times a day, like the 45 and the 42. Compared to the 43, the one that goes to Fruitvale runs 16 times a day, and the 98 runs 9 times a day on weekdays. So we certainly see a lot more ridership on those routes. And the HandyDART delivered over 7,000 rides last year. So in addition to the automatic passenger counters that are on board the buses and that provide some of that great ridership data, we also have some new data from UMO. And UMO is the electronic fare system that allows riders to use an app or a reloadable card for payment. And later this year, we do expect to introduce the ability to tap credit and debit cards on the bus so that you can also encourage people that might ride transit very infrequently to just be able to make a more spontaneous decision to get on the bus and to use a different mode of payment. So this UMO gives us great dashboard information like this about riders, who they are, how they buy products. This report is from the month of February of 2025, so it's really new data, and it is for the whole West Kootenay transit system, so Nelson, Castlegar, and Trail areas. But for the whole system, shows that 68% of riders were students. About half of them prefer to use the app when they're managing their fares, while the other half prefer the reloadable cards. And most of your local residents are likely to visit the Trail City Hall to purchase them. That was by far the most popular place in the area to purchase transit products, fare products. So this shows the top 5 routes by boardings in the whole West Kootenay transit system. So you see that the Route 98 is the most used route in the entire system, with over 4,000 riders in February alone. The number 43 to Fruitvale is right up there as well, with over 3,000 rides in February. We'll take a little bit of a closer look at the Route 98. And this is the regional connector between Trail and Castlegar. So a couple years ago, in 2023, the regional district agreed to fund additional service for the 98 because buses were often full and leaving people behind. The additional trips, 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon, were implemented in January of this year. And I wanted to take a minute just to show you what that investment did. So the first graph I have here This is from September of 2025. So if you recall, September is sort of one of our highest ridership months. And this is just when school started in the fall. It shows how full the bus is at various times of the day on its northbound journey and on its southbound journey back to trail. So the green bars show average boardings, but I want to pay more attention to the blue line, which is average of max load. And this blue line gives you a better idea of how many riders are on the bus at a single time. Because people can, board a bus and get off the bus. So you might have a lot of people getting on and getting off on a particular trip. But when we're interested in capacity, we really want to pay attention to how full does the bus get at its fullest time. So the vehicles in your fleet can seat 30 passengers. So anytime that blue line is above 30, it means that riders are standing, which is not ideal for highway travel. And there's a risk of riders waiting for the bus that won't get picked up. And we call those pass-ups. So we really want to avoid pass-ups. If someone is waiting at a bus stop, the last thing we want is a bus to drive by and not be able to pick them up because they're full. So again, this is from September. Sorry, my mistake. September of 2024, not 2025. This is from September of 2024, and which has high ridership because students are returning to school. And we often use September ridership when we're planning for the system because we want to plan a system so that it can support sort of the highest capacity, busiest times of the year or of the day. So this is what it was before the implementation of the new routes. And this is what it was from more recently from February. And I'm a year ahead of myself. So this is February of 2025. So this graph shows the same information for February, just after the additional trips were added to the schedule. And you can see that the average max load, that blue line, is often around 20 at sort of the busy times of the day. Remember, our buses seat 30 people. So this means that the bus is well utilized, but still comfortable for passengers and enough seats to pick all the riders up. And I'd certainly consider this a successful expansion and a valuable investment. I will just mention that I'm aware that student ridership is a big sort of one of your biggest demographics in the area, and it has reduced in the last year because of the federal policies regarding international students. So I know that has also impacted ridership locally and taken some pressure off of the transit system, particularly on this route for students traveling to Selkirk College. But right now, the service level for the 98 is well matched with the demand, and there is some room for ridership growth if international student registration is able to pick up again. So this is sort of the time of the year where we start thinking about future transit improvements, and timelines are long for implementing new service. So we need to really think ahead. As I mentioned, the regional district approved the 98 expansion in the fall of 2023, and it was implemented just a few months ago in January. So right now we're starting to plan and think about service that we want in place for 2027 and beyond. So this figure just sort of is attempting to help you prioritize how and when to consider investing in service improvements. So the first priorities for investments are to address critical operational needs and capacity issues. And the investment that was done to the 98 certainly fell into this category. Local service, including on the 98 to Castlegar, I'd say is currently well aligned with demand. So I wouldn't say that there's any category 1 or 2 improvements that BC Transit would recommend at this time. Any service improvements would likely fall into the sort of category 3, which is adding new service. So this could be things like increasing the frequency of existing routes or adding service to new areas. And if there is any interest in making additional investments, this is just sort of our key milestones over the next year. As I mentioned, things do take quite a long time, and we are at the very beginning stages of sort of planning for any potential interest or exploring cost estimates for future investments that would potentially be implemented in late 2026 or early 2027. And finally, I'll mention that the Downtown Trail Transit Exchange is progressing towards 95% detailed design and is expected to be in service by next spring. And the City of Trail has some building demolitions that they're planning for the area that's adjacent to this transit exchange, and we are coordinating construction efforts with them to minimize disruption to the community and local businesses. And I'm happy to take any questions about the presentation, or if there's requests sort of for more detailed or more specific ridership or performance stats. I'd be happy to talk a little bit more about that. And I look forward to seeing many of you in person at the convention in Kimberley. I'll be at the trade show, so come find me at my booth.
Thank you very much, Danica. I have Ali and then Andy and Terry.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Danica. Thanks for being here today. I got about 4 questions. You said the 13% cost recovery is kind of average for our kind of area. So again, just confirming a 13% cost recovery is normal for our community. You said that.
Yes, respectfully through the chair, yes, it's about in line with what I'd expect for a rural transit system.
Okay.
More urban systems might get closer to 20%, sometimes even 25% cost recovery. I don't think we have anything in BC that's higher than that. And for a smaller center or rural transit, certainly in that sort of 10-15% cost recovery is quite typical.
Okay, thanks. And then in the same little slide there, you had $160 an hour based on 18 rides per hour. But, you know, from my point of view, from the taxpayer point of view, we still have to pay for capital costs too. So I think saying it's $160 an hour doesn't take into account any of the capital that we have to pay for. So I don't know if you've got those numbers available when you weave in what we pay to make sure the service runs. If you have that number on what it costs per hour when you do include the capital, I'll just leave that question with you if you've got those numbers. There's a line, there's a bullet in there that says the provincial budget was approved February 2026. If you're asked to them, if successful implementation will begin. Do you mean the implementation of the exchange? I wasn't sure what was meant there.
Respectfully through the chair, for your first question, you're right that $160 an hour figure is just for operating transit. And that gives you a little bit of an idea if you were interested in, say, expanding service and you wanted to add 1,000 more hours to introduce service to a new area. That gives you a pretty good idea of what that 1,000 hours of additional service might cost you. It doesn't include your overall transit budget. If you were interested in that, we certainly have that, based on your budget. But one of our performance metrics that we report on annually is just the operating cost per hour.
No, and
that's how we get the your cost recovery. Yeah, because it is comparable between all of the systems, because every system has different capital costs and lease fees.
I would be interested in the overall cost that includes capital, if we could get that at some point, no hurry. And then the next one was implementation of something, if the budget is approved. Implementation of the downtown exchange?
Respectfully through the chair, that figure was talking about service expansions. So when we are when we are looking at and considering a service expansion for transit, we have to work in lockstep with the province, who is funding the other half of the service. And so we work with them and work through securing funding from the local government, such as yourselves, and then working with the province to secure funding from them. And once funding from both is secured and we get confirmation of that around budget day, which would be sort of March of next year, then we can look at implementing that service expansion. So that's just for service expansions. It's not about the facility expansions at all. And that long timeline is why we're really having to plan ahead, and why it took so long between, the decision to expand the Route 98 and actually getting more service on the road. It's about an 18-month sort of process.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was what I was referring to, but I'll take a minute to see if I can find it. Thanks anyway.
Okay.
Also, I can't remember, but the exchange and trail was valued at around $3 million. And I can't remember if that was our portion of the exchange or total cost of the exchange. Total cost,
Total cost,
okay, total cost,
80-20, was that the split?
yeah, 80.
That sounds about right, because you do have ISIP funding that brought down the local government share from that 50-50 share down to something closer to 20%.
Right, okay, and I'd like to see a more detailed plan of what that exchange looks like. It does seem like a lot of money, and are there any things in there that don't need to be done? I'd like to see a more detailed plan of it, because I have not. If I could request that through the chair to you, Danica, and that's all the questions I had. Thank you.
So, Danica, thank you for the report today. So you've got a notice item or a term in there called non-vehicle expansion. What is that referring to?
So sometimes, if you want to put an expansion, if we can fit that into the fleet that you already have, say you want to introduce service on Sundays. Right now, you don't have service on Sundays, so we have buses available. We can introduce that service without having to get you additional vehicles. Say you want to double the amount of service that you have for the Route 98. We're going to need more vehicles, and that lengthens sort of our implementation timeline, because a lot of that is waiting for the procurement of vehicles.
Great, okay.
So we also break it up. Also, right now, one of our biggest challenges in implementing expansions is securing vehicles. So
Gotcha.
they're also a lot, I'll say, harder to get approved, just because we often, the demand for new vehicles is definitely larger than the vehicles that we have access to.
So we make vehicles. I had a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Do we make vehicles in Canada? Or what buses
Yes.
built in Canada? Okay, that's good to know.
Third question.
The electrification. Oh, sorry, reduction of service. So when we sat around the table a couple of times and thought about looking at stats and whether or not we could reduce costs and the potential for reduction of services. So what are we looking at if we decided to reduce a run? What would the timing be? Would it take a year and a half or 2 years to do that as well?
No. So through the chair, if we're looking at reducing service, we sort of do the opposite of how we do a service change. So it takes us, I'll say, maybe, depending on the nature of it and how much rescheduling has to be done, it might take at most, I'd say, 6 months, depending on how complicated it is, because you often have, a single, bus driver and a bus will run, numerous routes throughout the day to fill up their, I'll say, 8-hour shift. And so if we're going to make efficient cuts, we want to make sure that we are potentially redoing larger aspects of the schedule so that we're cutting out whole shifts. and, you know, whole buses or things to actually make it more efficient, because we don't want, you know, to take out a route here and a route there, and then we just have the driver and the bus sitting, waiting for his next trip. So some of that can take some time. And we also have some timelines in our contracts with our operating partners that they need a certain amount of notice because they have unionized staff that will be potentially impacted by service reductions. But I'd say 6 months. We can make some changes. And I know that there's been interest in having a service review. So I've talked to Jen Getz, who is the planner for this area, and it's on her work plan, likely to start later this year, to do a service review for the trail area and take a deeper dive into the performance of some of these routes, maybe to come up with some recommendations for finding efficiencies or potentially reducing service if there was more of an interest in that. So that can be worked through work through that sort of planning exercise.
Great. Thanks for that update.
Greg, did you have?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, through the chair. Hi, Danica. It's Terry Martin from the City of Trail. With the demolition of the 900 Spokane Street, where the current exchange is, have you got anything in place, or what kind of time frame do you need for when the contract goes and when the building starts to go down? Because you won't be able to have any bus stops along that one section of Cedar Avenue.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So
A little bit louder, Terry.
where the current exchange is in downtown Trail on Cedar Avenue, that 900 Spokane Street, that building's coming down within the next couple of months. Now, we're not talking about any construction yet. When the building comes down, you're probably going to have to move the current stop area, exchange area where it is right now. I'm just wondering what the plan is for that.
Oh, that I don't have all the details on, but I know we are working with folks from the City of Trail, because we're well aware of their construction needs and the demolition needs and timing everything. And if we do need some temporary bus stops around the exchange, I think they'll make that happen. But I can certainly get back to you if we have more of a plan, but we're just starting those conversations with the city about how to coordinate construction efforts. But I haven't heard anything lately about how it will affect the current exchange.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I just had one. You said you are conducting a detailed service review of the trail area transit plan. Does that include Castlegar as well?
Through the chair, no, I think it wouldn't include Castlegar. I believe the last service review was just done for the trail area, and that was, I think, from 2017 or something, so it definitely needs to be looked at again. Nelson and Castlegar area had a strategic plan done more recently, so I don't think we're looking at that area or revising the sort of plan that's in place, because it is a lot newer.
Okay, so I'm just confirming it's the greater trail area detailed service review of the transit plan in the fall of this year.
I won't commit to a timeline. It's on my colleague's sort of work plan. Right now, she is doing 2 other strategic plans. So as soon as those wrap up, or get closer to sort of final, then she'll be able to start working on it. So I'll anticipate sort of later this year, with it likely not being completed until next year.
Andy?
So maybe you're not able to answer this, but with the service plan review, is it something that we are involved with as well as a committee? And I'm just wondering what that looks like.
Sure. So through the chair, I can speak to that really briefly, and I'll certainly, when we start getting into it, I'll bring in the planner who can walk through in more detail, how this committee and how the board is involved. But typically there's as much involvement as local government wants, either from sort of the committee level or from staff, but it is intended to be a collaborative effort because we want the review and the plan to really align with where you're at and what you want to get out of your transit system and what you want to see for the future. So if your sort of priorities are, efficiencies or potentially service reductions, we take that lens for the service review. But this service review would mostly take into a look at how the current schedule and how each of the routes are performing, and make some recommendations to adjust it. Typically, there's numerous check-ins with committees and boards throughout the development, sort of in setting the stage for the terms of reference, for what the what the review will include. Service reviews don't typically involve public engagement, but if public engagement was something that you were interested in, we'd certainly have additional check-ins to make sure that what we're engaging the public on is something that the committee's familiar with and comfortable with, and then coming back with information about sort of what we heard from the public. And then the document, when it's finished, is always something that we like to have approved by the committee and by the board. So it would be something that we'd come back to you with to make sure that there is comfort and that the final product is something that you can sort of endorse before it is finalized. So, and a lot of this is done, working with staff. Whether it's sort of your planning staff or anyone else that might have the capacity or the interest to provide input and guidance.
Okay, thank you very much, Danica. I think we've covered all the questions. I'm going to have a motion that the East End Services Committee receive the update from BC Transit as presented April 15th, seconded by Terry. Okay, motion carried, and now we're going to move in camera.
Motion to go on camera.
Yeah, the preamble there, I'm not going to read it. And the recommendation is that the East End Service Committee proceed to a closed meeting pursuant to section 90, 1E of the Community Charter.
I just made through the chair. I think